I'm really thrilled to speak on this topic because it's really close to my heart. I've been into open source for a long time. My name is Anirudha Bose. I'm a staff engineer at Brave, where I work on Web3 initiatives, and in particular, the Brave Wallet, which is a non-custodial multi-chain wallet right in your favorite browser. So what I intend to do in this talk is share my experience, my team's experience building Brave Wallet as an open source product, and hopefully leave you in the end with some questions as to whether or not you should use closed source wallets. So let's start with a question. You can see 12 wallets on this page. How many would you think are open source wallets? Like just a percentage. Any guesses? 2? Anyone else? 1? Okay. So we'll get back to what's the exact percentage. But let's first try to understand what is open source. What are the fundamentals of free and open source software? So it has two parts. The first part is free. And free is not as in free beer or free of cost. It is freedom. The French have a good way of explaining it. They call it libre. So if you've used softwares like LibreOffice, that's what libre means, liberty. How about open source software? So that's a good set of thumb rules for you to evaluate open source projects. Do you have the freedom to run and use the software in the way you want? Do you have the freedom to look at the source code and study the source code? Maybe audit it. Maybe you're skeptical. Can you do that with ChatGPT? Maybe not. Do you have the freedom to modify the source? This is one of the more neglected points. Do you have the freedom to modify the source and redistribute it under the license terms? So always make sure you've asked yourself these questions before using a product. So before moving on, I would like to share why I'm so excited about this topic. So here's my open source story. How many would recognize this? Does that mean something to anyone? Yeah? So this is back in 2008 or 9, Canonical, which is the patron of Ubuntu, used to distribute these free CDs if you just have to go to their website, there's a web form, fill out your address, and they would ship you physical CDs to try out Ubuntu. So I figured that out as a teenager. I got some Ubuntu CDs, that's your Linux operating system, and I was blown away because I was using Windows 98 and XP, and which may or may not have been an original copy. I'm not going to disclose that. But as soon as I used this, it changed my mental framework completely. What I did was I then requested hundreds of such CDs to Canonical. I made hundreds more in copies at home. And I shared it with every other friend I had in school. So sooner rather than later, it was like my small town, which never heard of Linux, was now using Linux by default, right? That's a big achievement. Back then, I didn't know how to code, so I started writing docs and making tutorial videos, doing surveys for some open source projects that I liked. But then I ramped it up, and I wanted to contribute to, as a builders, part of the builders tribe that makes these products. A lot of them was scientific software, but I just accidentally ran into things like Ethereum and Bitcoin. That's how I started my Web3 journey. So you can realize, this is also fun. If you've been to FOSDEM, which is an annual FOSS conference in Brussels, they have these, you would find these postcards that you can buy to contribute to the dev team or the Free Software Foundation, whatever may be the case. And I spammed the hell out of these postcards. I sent it to everyone I knew. That was my way of contributing. I didn't have a lot of money back then. So it changed my life. It really changed my life. Everything I've learned about software, about community, participating, building, I've learned that from open source through the years, through a decade of learning, being in this community. And yeah, it actually also landed me internships and jobs. So open source makes you lucky. Open source is everywhere. Even if you're using Android, you're probably using open source. I see some of you are using MacBook Pros. So that's also using a Darwin kernel, which is open source. Even your compiler infrastructure in Mac OS, that's using LLVM Clang, which is also open source. So it is everywhere. And it is not optional. A lot of people think open source is a luxury, that, okay, it's optional, we'll do it if we can afford it, but it's not, especially if you're building something like a crypto wallet. And I'm going to make the case why. So would you use Ethereum? So we just had a great talk from Protocol Guild, but would you use Ethereum if it were a closed source blockchain? Probably not. Let's also take the example of a recent upgrade that happened in Ethereum, the proof of stake. Well, uh, luckily, we don't have to trust Vitalik to know whether proof of stake works or not, because the spec that outlined proof of stake in the Serenity upgrade was published under a CC0 license, which is great. It waives all copyright and allows unrestricted research, development, and audits of the algorithm. So Vitalik is great, but we don't have to trust him to really know if it works. So if you're building digital public goods, what do you need to take care of? Well, you must demonstrate the use of an approved open source license. So this is the crucial point. OK, time for the results. So how many of these wallets are open source? So we can go back to the results. It's actually a bit shocking to me at least. 50% are closed source. These are all the most popular wallets in the space. And probably they hold more than 50% of all crypto value. So those are bad numbers. This is a bad slide. 33% are either partially open source, or some core components are open source, or they don't use a permissive open license, which means that you can see the source code, but you probably cannot do anything with it. And only 16% are open source. These are rookie numbers. Let's get those numbers up. So I've not explicitly mentioned the name of the wallet, but this was a hack back in 2022. This wallet is one of the more popular or most popular wallets in Solana. And $4 million got drained in just 2 days. How did that happen? It was not a sophisticated contract attack. The devs were logging the internal state in logs, and they were sending those logs to Sentry, which is like a hosted log analyzer. And the thing in the red box is your 12-word recovery phrase. That's crazy. So you wouldn't know because it's a closed source software, right? Something similar happened with another wallet. And this is one of the biggest hacks of 2023. I think it was in June. $35 million of funds getting drained. These are users who are never going to come back to crypto. These are average people, right? And the reason for that was because of a poor security stance, that a black box approach to security is better it makes your software more hardened, but it's exactly the opposite. Open source is what hardens your product. Okay, who remembers the I feel bad because I used to work at Ledger, but, but what happened was, in my assessment of what happened in the Ledger Recover fiasco was that it was a PR meltdown. So lack of, very bad miscommunication, lack of understanding of how hardware wallets work, lack of understanding of cryptography. But the community did have a meltdown and raised some good questions that why is it that all these chip manufacturers who make secure elements, why do they make it closed source and then force the vendors, the guys who use the chips, also to close down their firmware? So apparently, the community did not know that this was the case. And they were finding out, and that was the reaction. So a great thing happened as a result. It forced Ledger to commit to an open source roadmap. They had to build out an open source product strategy, heavily invest in education. And if you've talked to Ledger folks, you would understand that it was a 360 change in mindset. That the product is now built on open source ethos rather than it being an afterthought. So this is great news. So whenever you use a closed source wallet, uh, you run this physics test. Ask yourself, are you using a Schrodinger's wallet? If your wallet is closed source, you cannot know if it is non-custodial or custodial. You must assume that it's both. In fact, you can assume that it is custodial. So what is the brave way? So the brave way is that since the browser it is released under the license of Mozilla Public License 2.0, which is a really permissive license, by the way. Wallet is a native part of the browser stack, so it shares the same license. It is the only Web3 client that's written in C++. It's, I think the other one was Open Ethereum, but it's not actively maintained anymore. Yeah, under an open source license. And we also follow open processes for development of this software, which means your wallet or your browser cannot get an update without, or cannot get a feature without it riding the trains of channel migration from nightly to beta to release, right? And it all happens out in the open. And it's designed to be maximally configurable, which means you can use it in a manner you choose. And if you don't like it, you can build your own binaries and even distribute it if you want. That's great. Okay. So what is the bottom line? The bottom line is uh, open source is what brings goodness to public goods. If your public good is not open source or doesn't follow an open source flow, you cannot claim that it's good. And it brings transparency and accountability. When you use a closed source software, especially a closed source wallet, please try to understand the risks involved. Right? Don't get sold on shiny user experience. Ask yourself if you're using a Schrodinger's wallet. If you work on an open source project, or a closed source project, sorry, you can start a dialogue with key stakeholders around opening certain components of your wallet and progressively moving towards a complete open source solution. This is something that Trust Wallet does, by the way. You don't have the overall source code of the Android app, but you have source code available for the core components. And finally, oh, so two more points. So if you are a decision maker and your business most certainly relies on open source projects, consider contributing to it either in the form of dev hours or just donating money. Uh, and finally, when you're starting an open source, a new project, consider making it open source on day one. No one is going to steal your idea before it even gets fruition. Uh, choose a permissive license. There's a website called choosealicense.org that outlines where you can select a license based on your needs. Uh, so do that. And it also encourages, it's a good thing. It will be appreciated by the community for sure. So that's all I had to say. Thank you for listening, and I'll be around after my talk and in the after party. If you want to talk about wallets, open source, Robinhood or GameStop wallets are closed source, don't use them. So we can talk about that. Yeah, I'll be around. Thank you.